Patricia Gibson.
Mr Chair, and I want to begin by thanking the honourable member for Strangford for bringing this debate forward. He is something of a legendary season ticket holder for Westminster Hall. The ongoing cost of living crisis has no end in sight, and it's wreaking terrible damage on household incomes, families and even relationships across the United Kingdom. In-work poverty is particularly shameful, where people are going out to work day in, day out, and still cannot meet all the demands, the financial demands that they face. And we know that women are more likely to be living in poverty. They are more likely to be in lower paid jobs. They are more likely than their male counterparts to be single parents. And they are more likely to have caring responsibilities and even more likely to rely on social security. And we also know that women are much more impacted by austerity measures, as they are more likely to a greater degree rely on public services, which themselves are already under great pressure. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation has shown that families with younger children and lone parent families, which are predominantly headed by women, face a disproportionate risk of poverty. Having younger children impacts on a parent's ability to undertake paid work, the hours they can work and their pay, although it is important to say at this juncture, Mr Chair, that raising a child or raising children is work, something I think which often goes unrecognised. Of course, women being able to undertake paid work when they have young children must be an option open to every woman who chooses to take it. Childcare has an important role to play here. Scotland is leading the way in childcare provision across the UK, although there's still more to do. There's no room for complacency, with up to 1,140 hours of funded early learning and childcare a year, about 30 hours a week for 3- or 4-year-olds, with some 2-year-olds also being eligible. In England, 3- and 4-year-olds can only access around 570 free hours per week, which is about 73 hours per year, which is about 15 hours a week. Now, we had a lot of fanfare around childcare in the recent budget, but it doesn't really amount to much, because it will be at least 18 months before it can happen, and it wasn't accompanied by any detailed plan about increasing staff levels or infrastructure that I can see. But some people have said, Mr Chair, quite cynically, that the reason for the announcement was less about substance than about what you can put on an election leaflet, which would be really sad if it were true. The gender pay gap is another aspect that we need to think about when we're talking about women in poverty. The gender pay gap stands at around 15%, which widens dramatically when women have children. And one way to close that gap, and I know the Minister will be listening to this, one way to close the gender pay gap is to mandate employers to report on this issue. If you like, Mr Chair, effectively naming and shaming, putting the onus on employers to explain the gender pay gap in their organisations. And I'm once again going to make a plea to the Minister about delivering a real living wage for workers instead of the wee pretendy national living wage, which is both misnamed and misleading, since it is not based on the cost of living. In addition, to help support women in poverty, the UK Government must recognise that the policy of making a single payment of universal credit to a household can increase inequality in the welfare system and act as an enabler of domestic abuse or financial coercion. And I know that the Scottish Government continues to work with the UK Government to deliver split payments. I know that split payments are available in certain cases, but we really need to make sure that we keep pushing so that it becomes the norm, so that we can protect more women financially. And I would also ask the Minister to study closely the Scottish Government's Scottish Child Payment, now delivering £25 per week per child for those on the lowest incomes. It's projected it will lift 50,000 children out of poverty in 23-24, and it's been hailed as, and I quote, a game changer by anti-poverty charities, backed up as it is with £442 million of funding from the Scottish Government in the next financial year. So while the Scottish Government is doing all it can to support household incomes, despite an increase in the block grant of a miserly 0.6%, it does so with one hand tied behind its back, shackled as it is to this broken system. And of course, as the Honourable Member for Strangford mentioned, there is the gender pension gap, when in old age, women are more likely than their male counterparts to be poorer. And of course, this is easy to understand because women are more likely to have had breaks in their working lives, to raise children or undertake caring responsibilities. They're more likely to have been on low pay in their working lives and are more likely to have undertaken part-time work. As a result, women will suffer greater poverty in old age, living longer and suffering more years of poor health. Age UK has shown that one in five women pensioners are living in poverty. Indeed, research shows that women on average would have to work an additional 16 years to retire on the same pension as a man. Many of us have campaigned on the issue of the gender pension gap and are still waiting for the UK Government to expand auto-enrolment by removing the earnings threshold, a fairly simple step that would have an impact on women's pensions. But we cannot talk about women in poverty without acknowledging the great injustice inflicted on women born in the 1950s who were robbed of their pensions and had their retirement plans thrown into chaos when the retirement age was raised with little or no notice, depriving them of tens of thousands of pounds of their rightful pension. Many of these WASPI women, and I pay tribute to their dogged determination to campaign against the injustice they've suffered, many have as a result been thrown into poverty after a lifetime of low pay. Many have faced financial ruin, and worse, many have died due to ill health without ever receiving their rightful pension. And whilst we are debating women in poverty, it has to be said that there's a widespread view, Mr. Chair, that the way these women have been so cruelly treated would never have happened to men. The truth is that these women were seen as an easy target for a government wishing to cut spending, which is shameful. The fact that a whole generation of women had the retirement age increased with little or no notice in the way that it was done to these women is beyond shocking, because alongside it came poverty, indignity and hardship, which these women will not easily forgive. This would never have happened to a whole generation of men. So there's a number of things that this government could do, and I would urge the Minister to work with the WASPI women to work out how these women can be compensated in due course when the ruling is made on this matter. But there's a number of things this government could do to support women in poverty, and it could do much more, but it is not doing so. The UK Government controls 85% of welfare spending, so I urge the Minister to use her good offices to make sure that the powers that lie with the UK Government are used judiciously to support women who are living in poverty. So I've set out some of the ways I think that the Minister might consider doing that, and I hope that she will take note.